In the beginning of this week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Voeschanan el Hashem. This is, of course, referring to the time where he's asking Hashem to be allowed into Eretz Yisrael. In the Sifri, there are two opinions about this word Voeschanan. Number one is that the word Voeschanan is from the same shayrish, or the same word as chinam, which means for free. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu was asking Hashem that he should allow him into Eretz Yisrael as a matnas chinam, as a free gift. And as it's explained over there, that even though tzaddikim could technically ask in the merit of their good deeds, nevertheless, they only ask Hashem that it should be in a way of a free gift. Number two is that Voeschanan is actually one of the expressions of tefillah. It's one of 10 expressions of tefillah. Now, in the Medrash Rabbah, on this pasuk, there's also these two ideas of Voeschanan. Either that it is from the 10 expressions of tefillah, that express tefillah, or that it is an expression of matnas chinam. But in the Medrash, it's not two different opinions, but rather it's one and the same pirush, of the same mandamer, of the same person, saying both of them, as one pirush. And this is what the Medrash says there. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Asaru l'shoinis nekras tefillah. Tefillah is called by 10 different words, 10 different names. One of them is tachanunim, and the Medrash says it, that we see it from the word voeschanan el Hashem, so this is an expression of tachanunim. And from all of these expressions, which one does Moshe choose? Moshe davens in a way of voeschanan, tachanunim. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the same Rabbi Yochanan, goes on and says, Mikana tolamit, from here we learn that a person doesn't really have any claims against Hashem. In other words, he can't really demand from Hashem, because Moshe Rabbeinu is coming with an expression of tachanunim, which means that the expression tachanunim, voeschanan, is referring to the type of tefillah, the type of request, when one is asking in a way of matnas chinam, when he's asking it for a free gift, because ein leberia klum etzel boiri, because no one can really have any claims on Hashem. And as Rabbi Levi says right afterwards as well, why is it that Moshe asks specifically in a way of tachanunim? This is based on something that Hashem had said, that if someone doesn't deserve, then b'matnas chinam ani oiseimoi, I give it to him in a way of a free gift, and that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for as well. So again, in summary, according to the Sifri, these are two different opinions, whether it's a lashon tefillah or it's an expression of matnas chinam. According to the Medrash, they're actually part of the same pirush. In other words, it is an expression of tefillah, but what kind of tefillah? The kind of tefillah where you're asking for a matnas chinam. So it says the Rebbe, we need to understand what is the svara, what is the logic behind the machloikas between the Sifri and the Medrash. Are these two pirushim, or is it one and the same pirush? So there are mefarshim that explain the difference between the two opinions in the Sifri. And that is, according to the first pirush, that Voeschanan is an expression of matnas chinam. So it's similar to as if the word would have said voeschanam with a final mem instead of the nun. Meaning that it's from the word chinam. So he's asking Hashem to give him a matnas chinam, a free gift. And that's why it's not one of the expressions of tefillah, because in the word voeschanam itself, there's no expression of tefillah. It's from the word of chinam. Whereas, according to the second pirush, the word voeschanan is one of the expressions of tefillah because it's an expression of tchina v'tachanunim. In other words, the question is, what's the shaydish of this word? Is it a word of chinam, or is it a matter of tachanunim, of pleading and begging, as similar to what the Medrash said? So, says the Rebbe, according to this, will then come out that the opinion of the Medrash that brings both of these things together is that even though it's true voeschanan is not from the word chinam, but nevertheless, in other words, it's more from the word tachanunim, begging and pleading, but nevertheless, the idea of a tefillah of tachanunim, the idea of a tefillah that's more about pleading, is that it's the kind of tefillah when you're asking for a matnas chinam. Says the Rebbe, but we need to understand, since according to both the Sifri as well as the Medrash, but Poyel, Moshe was asking Hashem for a matnas chinam, for something for free. So what is really behind this argument? Whether Moshe Rabbeinu is using an expression that only means chinam, as the first opinion in the Sifri, Or is Moshe Rabbeinu using an expression of tefillah, as the Medrash says, but it's the kind of tefillah that's fitting when we are asking for a matnas chinam. So the Rebbe says the explanation is that when we ask Hashem that Hashem should give us our needs and the like, there's two ideas. There are 2 points over here. There's one point is how one is asking. Is he asking in a way of begging, pleading, or is it demanding? And number 2, we look at what's the reason why Hashem should fulfill his request? In the person's mind, why is it that Hashem should listen to his request? Does he feel that he actually deserves it? Or he thinks that it's a matnas chinam, that Hashem should just give it to him, even though he's undeserving, Hashem should give it to him for free. And the Rebbe explains, what's the idea that a person might feel that he deserves it? And yet, there's also, at the same time, there could also be this idea that he's asking it in a way of matnas chinam. So the Rebbe says like this, since on the one hand Hashem created the person, so Hashem should be supplying him with all of his needs. And as the Pasuk says, V'racham of al kol ma'asav, Hashem's compassion is on all of the things that he made, especially a Yid that's a Ben Avram, Yitzchak v'Yaakov. So he definitely deserves the very, very best. To use the expression of the Gemara, Su'uda Shloima b'Shaitoi, that every Yid deserves the type of meal similar to what Shloima HaMelech had during the time of his kingship. Especially a Fruma Yid, a Shomer Torah and mitzvahs. So the Pasuk says, in B'chu Koisei Teilechu, you follow the mitzvahs, v'nasati geshmeichem, that Hashem gives you everything. And the Rebbe says, in fact, the main idea of tefillah, one could say, according to Torah's emes, is really this sort of tefillah, that the person really deserves it. And he's asking Hashem to give him what he deserves. Now, even though you could come along and ask if you deserve it, especially through your mitzvahs, then why do you even have to daven for it? So the Rebbe says, number one, because by davening for it, you might actually get much more, and b'sever panim yafos, with Hashem's smiling face, than that which you were just gotten for what you deserve and as a reward. More importantly, it's known that whatever the Eibishter gives you, even as a payment, even as a reward, it's not really that the Eibishter is obligated to give it to you. The Pasuk says, Olacha Hashem chesed, ki ato teshalim le'ish k'ma'aseihu. It's your kindness that you pay everyone according to their deeds. In other words, really Hashem doesn't owe anyone anything. This itself, that Hashem gives payment and gives reward, is because Hashem decided that that's the system. And therefore, one davens to the Eibishter, and you can't really demand it, but rather you're asking Hashem to give it to you b'matnas chinam. And as Chazal say, that one should actually not put up the tefillah in a way that he's asking it based on his own merits, because even when Hashem is going to fulfill your request because of your good merits, it's still not the right thing that a person should be davening to Hashem, that Hashem should be doing it for his chusim. So again, there's the 2 points what we said was so far is that there could be one way in the way a person is asking. Is he asking it in a way of tachanunim, of begging, or is he demanding it? The second thing we said is there could also be a difference of what the person feels, whether he really deserves it, or is it matnas chinam. Says the Rebbe, this is now going to be the difference between the Sifri. And when we say the Sifri, in most of the Sicha, we're speaking about the first opinion in the Sifri, which says that Voeschanan is Loshen matnas chinam, in other words, not associating it with the idea of tefillah. We're not speaking about the second Pirush in the Sifri that says it's just a Loshen tefillah. We're mainly going to be discussing the first opinion in the Sifri that says that it's purely matnas chinam, and the Medrash, which sort of combines the two and says, yes, it's a Loshen tefillah, but matnas chinam. So the Rebbe says these 2 ways of how we connect the word with Voeschanan with matnas chinam are going to be these 2 different ways of how one could ask for a matnas chinam. And that is, according to the Medrash, Voeschanan, when Voeschanan is matnas chinam, is just describing the way the person is asking for it, the way he's davening for it. As we have a pasuk that says, Tachanunim yidaber rosh, a poor man asks and speaks in a way of tachanunim, in a way of pleading, in a way of begging, as opposed to an usher, a rich man, that Yana Azaz, that speaks in a more chutzpahdik way. In other words, someone that's standing in a way of bittul, the opposite of azus, the opposite of chutzpah, then automatically when he davens for things, as we'll soon see in a minute, that's even if he feels that he did something right and he deserves it, still the way he davens is b'lashon tachanunim. He's begging, he's pleading, he's asking for a matnas chinam. That means, says the Rebbe, yes, he knows that he did maisim tovim, but at the same time, the way he's asking Hashem is in a way of matnas chinam. And that's why the Medrash says about matnas chinam that it's lashon tachanunim. In other words, it's a davening, but it's the way the davening is happening is the kind of davening is that he's davening in a way that it's a matnas chinam. That he's asking Hashem not because he's not asking it in a way as if demanding it because he deserves, but he's asking it in a way as if it's a free gift. Whereas according to the Sifri, the idea of matnas chinam is not only the way the person is davening, the kind of language or tone that he's using, but rather it's even in his feeling. He's asking a matnas chinam because he truly feels that he does not deserve it. He feels that he doesn't have merits that the Eibishter should have to fulfill his requests for that. And that's why he's asking the Eibishter truly for a matnas chinam. Says the Rebbe, because of this first opinion in the Sifri that says it's just matnas chinam, says Voeschanan is matnas chinam, and therefore it's not one of the lushonis of tefillah. Why? Because this sort of request, just asking something as a free gift, be'emes, that's not the idea of what tefillah, the way tefillah was set up from the outset, as we explained before, that tefillah usually is that you daven to the Eibishter for something that, yes, you have done things to deserve, and you daven to the Eibishter for it. But according to this opinion in the Sifri, that says it's just a matnas chinam, when you really feel you don't deserve anything at all, then it's not a tefillah. Then it's just purely a request. You're asking the Eibishter to give you something that you don't deserve. Applying this to Moshe Rabbeinu. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu surely always remembered that he is the one that got the Torah from Har Sinai and so many other things, and therefore in his own feelings he definitely should be aware of the fact that he has maisim tovim, he definitely has plenty of good deeds. Nevertheless, the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu was to such an extent that what he constantly felt was that he doesn't personally deserve anything for any of these things that he had done. The Rebbe says it's well known, the explanation of the pasuk Va'ish Moshe anav ma'od mikol adam asher al pnei ha'adam, that Moshe Rabbeinu felt very humble. He felt himself more humble than anyone else. He held himself lower than everyone else. And that is, notwithstanding the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu knew of all of his great milos, his great qualities compared to all other people. And yet he feels humbled and feels lower than everyone else because in his mind what he thought was that all of this, first of all, is not any of his own personal, it's not due to his personal chidush. In other words, this is not his own effort. This is all something that was given to him from Hashem, all of his abilities that he had. And furthermore, on the contrary, he felt that if anybody else would have those koiches, those abilities, those qualities that he had, Moshe Rabbeinu felt that person would do it better than himself. So in summary, Moshe Rabbeinu, according to the Sifri, is coming and saying that he feels that he doesn't actually have any zchusim with which to come to demand anything. Says the Rebbe, this is also going to be now the difference between the wording of the Sifri and the wording of the Medrash. In the Medrash, what's emphasized is Ein leberia klum eitzel boiroi. In other words, compared to Hashem, to be able to demand something from Hashem, one's avodah is not toifas mokim. One's avodah is really very, very insignificant, and therefore, according to the Medrash. So even though maybe he has some good deeds, but nevertheless he's going to ask the Eibishter in a way of tachanunim, a way of pleading, in a way of a matnas chinam as a free gift. But that still means that he feels that he did good things, but compared to the Eibishter, it's not so significant. Whereas the Sifri, what does the Sifri say? That they could have technically asked in the merits of their good deeds, and yet they ask the Eibishter to just give them something for free. What does this emphasize? Not the idea that their good deeds are insignificant compared to Hashem, but rather it's emphasizing the humility of these tzaddikim, that they don't even feel that their good deeds are worth anything at all. In other words, as we said before about Moshe Rabbeinu, he feels it's all due not to his own koiches at all. It's all the Eibishter gave it to him. And therefore they ask the Eibishter in a way of pure matnas chinam. They don't feel that they deserve it at all, and they're asking completely for a free gift. Says the Rebbe, based on the explanation of these two different ways of how to understand when Moshe says Voeschanan el Hashem, this will also explain the difference between the two pirushim which Rashi actually brings in how Hashem responds to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem, after this Voeschanan el Hashem, Hashem says Ravloch. What do these words Ravloch mean? So Rashi has two explanations. One explanation is Ravloch means that it's enough for you. You don't keep on asking. Why? Shaloyoimru, people shouldn't say Harav Kamakosha, how difficult the master is, meaning Kvayachol Hashem, not giving in to Moshe. V'hatalmid Kamasarvanu Maftzir, and the Talmud Moshe Rabbeinu, how he doesn't keep on, how he keeps on insisting, and he's not taking no for an answer. So that's the first Pirush of Rashi Ravloch. The second Pirush of Rashi Ravloch, Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, Ravloch, you have plenty coming to you. There's plenty of good, plenty of reward that's hidden for you that you're still going to be getting. Says the Rebbe, these two Pirushim in Ravloch actually correspond to the two explanations on Voeschanan. According to the Pshat that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking literally for a matnas chinam, something for free. In other words, he doesn't feel that he deserves it at all. So Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, stop asking, because people shouldn't say how difficult the master is, etc. Because if not for that, since Moshe Rabbeinu is asking a matnas chinam, something for free completely, then technically there's no limit how much he could keep on asking. Because he's not asking based on any merit. So he could keep on asking again and again and again. So Hashem says, just please stop. Whereas according to the Pirush of Voeschanan is that it's actually one of the expressions of tefillah. And we said that tefillah Hashem is answering in the merits of the person that's davening. So Hashem is telling him something else. Hashem is saying, you have merits, and there's plenty of good that is hidden for you that you're going to get reward for your ma'asim tovim, much more than just this going into Eretz Yisrael. Says the Rebbe, but we still need to understand. At the end of the day, what is the basis, what is the reason for this machloikas between the Sifri and the Medrash? Again, Sifri will always mean, the first Pirush of the Sifri, that it means completely a matnas chinam. In other words, what's really the difference? Whether Voeschanan and matnas chinam of Tfilas Moshe is, according to the Medrash, it's an expression of Tfilah. In other words, that's just the way he's davening. He's expressing it in a way that he doesn't really deserve it. Or, as we said from the Sifri, that Moshe Rabbeinu truly holds that he doesn't deserve it. And this is why he can't use an expression of Tfilah, because Tfilah is when you do have some sort of merits, and therefore he's purely asking for a matnas chinam. Says the Rebbe, in order to understand this, the Rebbe introduces one more point. And the Rebbe says, we know that on Moshe Rabbeinu there was a gzeira that he shouldn't go into Eretz Yisrael. After Moshe Rabbeinu conquered the lands of Sicha and Oig, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu thought that the neder was off. The promise that Hashem made that he shouldn't go into Eretz Yisrael was off. But that's only as far as the promise that Hashem made, that the Shvuah is off. So he thinks now that he went into Sicha and Oig, maybe that promise was off, and that's why he was able to enter the lands of Sicha and Oig. And the reason being for that, and he thinks that the neder also to Eretz Yisrael doesn't apply now, because we have a concept that neder shehut or miktzosoi, a neder that a part of it was annulled, then the whole thing is annulled. But that's only as far as the vow or as far as the promise that Hashem made. But that still seemingly does not take off the actual gzeira itself, the decree, the punishment that there was decreed on Moshe Rabbeinu that he's not going to be going into Eretz Yisrael. And this is why, says the Rebbe, even after Moshe Rabbeinu thinks that the neder maybe is off, he's still davening to Hashem to take off the gzeira. Says the Rebbe, now we can come to understand the machloikas between the Sifri and the Medrash, because this really depends on another machloikas. There are two opinions. Whether tefillah helps after Exardin, after there was a decree made in Shamayim, whether tefillah could help on that, or tefillah could only help before the gzeira, before the decree was made. So the Medrash is of the opinion that holds that tefillah could help even after Exardin. And this is why the Medrash says that Moshe was actually doing a tefillah by Voeschanan. So Voeschanan is one of the 10 expressions of tefillah. It's just that within tefillah itself, he's using an expression of tachanunim, which is more related to the matnas chinam, as said before. Whereas according to the Sifri, again, always looking at the first Pirush in the Sifri, that he's purely asking for a matnas chinam, this is because the Sifri holds that tefillah would only help before the gzeira. And therefore, in this case, that tefillah actually would not help. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is not being mispalel, but he's asking the Eibishter for a matnas chinam, that even though tefillah wouldn't help, and usually this wouldn't work, he's asking the Eibishter for purely a free gift. Says the Rebbe, in a similar way we can explain a machloikas between Bavli and Yerushalmi in regards to the following Mishnah. The Mishnah says that a person that should daven regarding a pregnant woman, that his wife should give birth to a zocher, to a male, says the Mishnah, this is a tefillah shav, it's in vain. Now, according to the Bavli, the timing that the Mishnah is talking about is right after the first 40 days. In other words, once the tzuras havlad, once the body is taking already some sort of shape and form, there's no point anymore in davening for it. Whereas according to the Yerushalmi, so there's two opinions, but according to one opinion, the Mishnah is speaking about only once the woman is in labor. But before that, the tefillah can help to change it from a female to a male. There's actually an opinion that says even while she's in labor, it could still be changing. So the Rebbe says, what's the machloikas? What's this machloikas based on? So we know that generally there's a difference between the style of Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi. Talmud Bavli is what the Rebbe calls the derech of learning is milmato l'mayla. In other words, there's many, many questions. You need to have a lot of effort. The person's effort needs to be invested in order to reach the conclusion. As opposed to Yerushalmi, which things go much more smooth in a way, more of milmayla l'mata. It's more clearly seeing the end result, etc. So says the Rebbe, from the perspective of the Bavli, the whole idea of tefillah is also very, very much measured and is according to the limitations of the person davening. That's the style of Bavli. It's all a milmata l'mayla approach. And therefore, since according to nature, the child cannot change after 40 days from a female to a male, so there's no point in davening. It's a tefillah shav. Says the Rebbe, this would also be the explanation for something that the Gemara says over there of why it is that by Dina, a tefillah did help after 40 days. It says that Leah davened that this child should be a girl because she would then have the amount of boys that wouldn't allow Rachel to have 2 boys, as discussed over there. But the point is that she davened that this child should turn into a girl. And why did it help over there? So the Gemara says because Leah is an exception to the case. She was milumedes b'nisim. In other words, for her, nisim was a very regular thing. And that's why for her, a tefillah that's usually coming mitzad the person, so fine, there it was a miracle was able to help, but usually it wouldn't work. But according to the Yerushalmi, which the style of Yerushalmi is not so much connected with the person's yigiyah, the person's effort. Yerushalmi doesn't go so much with this whole style of questions and answers to the same extent as in Bavli. It's more in a way of Ur Yashar, in other words, like a gift coming from above. The halacha is just given to you. So therefore, its view on tefillah is also the concept of more of a, similar to the idea of a matnas chinam, which has a free gift, which has no limitations, and therefore, even while the woman is in labor, the child could change. The Rebbe now moves on to explain all of this according to Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah this idea of ein voeschanan ela matnas chinam. What's this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu was davening in a way of matnas chinam? Because Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to achieve, by going into Eretz Yisrael, he was hoping to achieve by the Yidden the kind of level which is way higher from anything that a Yid could receive through his own avodah. Or in the language of Chassidus, this is called, he wanted to draw down an isarusa de la'ela, inspiration, an arousal from above, which is completely higher than isarusa de l'sato, than that which a person could achieve based on his avodah. And that's the idea of matnas chinam. Chinam is connected to the idea, as it says, chinam beloy mitzvahs, which means it's a level that's higher than the avodah of mitzvahs. It's just coming because the Eibishter is giving it, not because you deserved it. Says the Rebbe, this will explain to us the svara of the Sifri, that the pshat of Voeschanan is not that it's one of the expressions of tefillah, but it's purely a matnas chinam. Why not tefillah? Because generally the avoid of tefillah is more the avoid of mulmat olamayla. Generally the avoid of tefillah is more about isarusad lasata, the person's avodah. And therefore, in order to bring about by Hashem that it should be fulfilled, this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu should be able to go in and see the land, etc., which would have achieved by the Yidden this idea of a gilui in a way of isarusad la'ela. So therefore Moshe's request also had to be similar to that, not in a way of tefillah, which is usually dependent again on the avodah of the person, but rather he's asking in a way of matnas chinam, completely not related and connected to merits, as we discussed. And he's hoping to achieve through that also that which should come down Malamayla is something way beyond the avodah of the Yidden. So that's the Sifri. But nevertheless, the Medrash holds that even Voeschanan, which we said is a matnas chinam, is a free gift, and yet it's still one of the expressions of tefillah. Now, how could that make sense? Tefillah, we just said, is more of a mulmat olamayla approach. Says the Rebbe, we're going to understand this based on the Tzemach Tzedek explanation on this Maimer Likutei Torah. But first, the Rebbe mentions another point from the Likutei Torah. And the Rebbe says that in Likutei Torah it's explained that this request of Moshe, that things should come down in a way of Isarusa de Leila, which is completely higher than Isarusa de Lasata, is really the idea of Torah. Because Torah, through Torah, is drawn down from above to below, the level of Anoichi, the very essence of Hashem, Anoichi, Misha, Anoichi, the level that's completely higher than any Avodah, than any Isarusa de Lasata. Torah is given as a gift, as a matana from above. So the Tzemach Tzedek asks a very simple question. Then what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu did not get what he asked for through his tefillah? Clearly we have Torah, and through Torah now as well we draw down these very high levels that are this high kind of Isarusad Le'ela. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, that what Moshe Rabbeinu was really asking was a combination of two things. He wanted on the one hand that yes, there should be this very high Hamshacha through Torah, which comes as a gift and is Harusad La'ela as mentioned. But what he wanted is that the idea of Torah should also have an effect, a very Gashmiistic effect in our world. Usually we say that's the advantage of what Tefillah is all about compared to Torah. Because Torah is usually having an impact more in the spiritual realm, in the Olam Yisrael Yonim, in the higher worlds. But through tefillah, a person davens, he is asking for Hashem, and hopefully it gets fulfilled, that the Gashmis, the world should change. A sick person should become cured, rain should come down. The Rebbe says this is actually connected to the idea, because tefillah is milmat olamayla. Therefore, what tefillah achieves is that the mata, the place where you're davening, should actually change. So again, Torah has the advantage that it's coming from above in a way of a gift, undeserved in a certain sense. But tefillah has that advantage that it changes the world. Moshe wanted that even the Hamshach Lamata, even the one that which comes down into this world, should be in a way of Isarus and Leila, completely from above, completely beyond what's deserved, and that should come down through Torah rather than through tefillah. Says the Rebbe, this is why the Medrash says that the way Moshe Rabbeinu was asking this matnas chinam was in an expression of tefillah, meaning to say, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to have the advantage of both of these things coming together. On the one hand, he wanted it to be a matnas chinam isarusad la'ela, but how should it come down all the way into this world? It should be like tefillah that comes down into the place of tefillah in this Gashmiistic world. And therefore, in his Voeschanan, he includes both things together. On the one hand, it's a tefillah, but what kind of tefillah? It's matnas chinam, because he wants the advantage of Torah together with that advantage of tefillah. Nevertheless, bottom line, again, we said Moshe Rabbeinu didn't actually achieve this through his Voeschanan, through his davening. Why? Because the Tachlis HaKavana, the ultimate goal is that everything should come through Avodah, not just coming in a way that's free. And therefore, even though, as a result of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go into Eretz Yisrael, the entering in Eretz Yisrael happened through Yoshua, who compared to Moshe is compared to like the face of the moon, as opposed to the face of the sun, and like the moon that there's constant changes. So therefore, this is also what happens with the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, that there's possible to be afterwards a Golus. Not as it would have been had they gone in through Moshe Rabbeinu, which then there would have been no changes. There would have been an eternal geula because it wouldn't be dependent on our avodah down here. Nevertheless, there's the reason why it happened this way is because there is the emaila of avodah. As the pasuk says, "L'maisei yodecha tichsef," as Hashem has a desire, davka, to the avodah of people down here. And ultimately, this brings down even a greater oil, even higher than that which would come through the matnas chinam. And of course, all of this will be nisgala down here, b'geula amitis v'ashleima, through Mashiach tzidkeinu b'meheira v'yameinu mamash.